And a warm welcome along to the At the Races flat season preview. In this section, we're looking at the 3-year-old Colts. Keep a lookout on the website for our sections on the 3-year-old fillies and also on the older horses. And we'll also be giving you details of how you can enter the Tote 10 to follow. So this time we're looking at the 3-year-old Colts in the company of Kevin Blake, who joins us alongside Matt Chapman. And of course What's up, Matt?
Look, let's get one thing absolutely clear straight away. There'll be no RS 1, 2, 3, 4s in the 2000 Guineas or the Derby or the St Ledger or indeed any other race. The last thing anyone wants is that smug bloke over there, that smug bloke going on and on about, oh, I'm so happy that I gave you the 1, 2, 3, 4, but even better that I beat that bloke next to me in the big screen.
Well, maybe there will be a 1, 2, 3 in the 2000 Guineas, the first classic of the season. Aidan O'Brien's got a good, strong hand going into this with the likes of Wembley, St Mark's Basilica and Battlegrounds. Well, let's have a quick look at the betting for the 2000 Guineas. The market headed by one ruler, who's available at 5 to 1. St Mark's Basilica at 11 to 2. Battlegrounds 6 alongside Wembley. Thundermoon at 7. Master of the Seas at 10. And it's 16s bar those. And Kevin, we all know Aidan O'Brien's record in these classics. Is there a standout Ballydoyle contender?
I don't think there is, Martin. I don't think there has been all the way through, and the betting tells you that as well. And I'd imagine there'd be a great amount of variation from individual to individual in terms of who thinks, which one is the best one. My own opinion, in terms of the Guineas, I do like St Mark's Basilica. I've liked them all along. You get the impression that they've really liked them all along. They threw him into the deep end of the Phoenix Stakes, as a maiden on a second start, and he was absolutely backed off the boards. He went off favourite that day, and look, things didn't go right for him on the day, but he's subsequently shown why there was that sort of market support for him. He won his maiden thereafter, shaped better than the bare result in the National Stakes, and then went to Newmarket and won the Dewhurst. And I know, look, there'll be some that will make a case for Wembley and potentially reversing that form in a different set of circumstances. But St Mark's Basilica, did what he needed to do on the day. He's been to Newmarket and handled the dip quite well, which is a positive with a view to the Guineas. And, there's a case to be made for Wembley too, but St Mark's Basilica, in terms of what we saw last year, his overall profile, of course, he's a half-brother to Magna Grecia. He'd be the one I'd be narrowly favouring, just of the Ballydoyle bunch, but it's certainly not just there for Ballydoyle's taking. There's plenty of other nice horses in there too.
And it does shape up, Matt, as though it's almost a Ballydoyle versus Godolphin head-to-head in the 2000 Guineas.
Yeah, which actually does, for me, add some interest to the race, because I think we quite like these clashes between Dubai and Cornwall. They all seem to be quite chummy these days. It was a bit more fun when they seemed to absolutely loathe each other. Yeah, I think that's right. I thought St Mark's Basilica was a very worthy Dewhurst winner on the day. I think the Wembley supporters will turn to the fact that a little bit extra distance might make the difference for Wembley. But if he is absolutely top class, he does have a lot of defeats on his card, even though they're narrow defeats. Obviously, Battleground is a fascinating horse because they missed the Dewhurst with him and they went off to Keeneland instead. Is that because they thought he'd be more suited to American racing, or maybe he wasn't quite the #1 juvenile, which usually does go for the Dewhurst? But I think he is a really good horse, Battleground, chunky, and he didn't run badly in the Breeders' Cup at all. And then you've got the Godolphin horses headed by one ruler who will go straight there. And Master of the Seas, I think, will always beat La Barossa now, the Craven one too. And I do think Master of the Seas' Craven win was a really good one, considering what went wrong in the race. Although I would put a clause in there that this might just be a horse who enjoys things going wrong. I'm not sure he is the easiest. And let's just put one thing out there. The vibes at Newmarket, and I was lucky enough to be there for the Craven meeting, the vibes at Newmarket were really that one ruler was much better than Master of the Seas and the Barossa. So on that basis, it's hard to go with Master of the Seas, because my gut feeling is that Buick will end up on one ruler.
Yeah, of course, he ran in the Verton Futurity at the back end of the season. We've touched on the first two home, Kevin, in the Dewhurst. In behind them was Thunder Moon. He's very much lightly raced. Would he be a horse that someone could put into a tenterfuller this season?
He'd have to be in the mix, Martin, in fairness. Like what he did in the National Stakes at the Curragh was very impressive. A messy race, as we know. He was locked up until very late, and he showed a very sharp turn of foot to get himself out of trouble and go in well. I know a couple of others, Wembley, and St. Mark's Basilica as well, shaped very well behind him. But, he had a fair bit to overcome on the day himself, and went to the Dewhurst. And look, I know some will think that he was beaten fair and square, but I just thought myself he was in the wrong part of the track that day because of his draw, and the race just didn't go perfectly for him. So I'd be happy enough to see a rematch with those horses, especially back on a faster surface at Newmarket. He should be okay over the mile. He's a horse with plenty of speed, but he should be okay over a mile. And I think you have to put him in the mix based on those two runs in Group 1s.
And going back to the Craven meeting, Matt, how impressed you with Mutasabek of Charlie Hills? I know front runners kind of dominated through the week, but the way he stretched through the line, I thought was really taking.
It really was, and it was very obvious that Crowley absolutely loved Mutasabek. Look, I don't think he's going to end up probably in this, is he? I don't know, maybe he is, but he's clearly a colt to follow for the future. Look, Hamdan or Shabwell, whatever you want to call them these days, have got some exciting horses. I mean, Al Bashir of Owen Burrows has got promise in the book as well, as far as sort of mining this season is concerned. But having said all that, the Guineas is still really almost the final big two-year-old race. And the likes of St Mark's Basilica and Wembley, they've got so much experience, and Master of the Seas, to be honest, as well, and One Ruler, that those really lightly raced horses, I don't know what Kevin thinks, but I think that experience could count for a lot. Now, if one of those other horses turns out to be a Nash One or something, super special, then obviously they can still win. But in general terms, the really experienced horses bring a high level of form, and I would have thought the combination of that experience and the level of form would be enough to send one of the more obvious ones home. Of course, the big question is which one.
Do you want to come in on that, Kevin?
Yeah, look, I actually kind of agree with Matt. I think it'll be tough for an unexposed one. Because look, last year, it's easy to forget it, but last year was such a strange year, and I think Aidan O'Brien has talked about it a lot, that it really messed his plans up with his 2-year-olds. He had them very forward, ready to go for the start of the season. He had to put the brakes on them, and everyone was in the same boat. We didn't know when we were going to get back racing, and a lot of trainers did different things with their 2-year-olds. Some kept kicking in the hope that racing would come back. Others took a big pull, and it messed things up a bit, I think. And Aidan's results with his 2-year-olds, they only really started to roll, in September, October. So a horse like Wembley would say, for example, that, as Matt rightly says, he's been beaten his share of times. But I think those nicer horses of Aidan's, I think he did end up, taking his time with those, and they did benefit run to run. Whereas the sharper ones, I think he seemed to give them a good squeeze early and then had to back off him again. And those ones seem to get more messed about than your more miler middle distance type. So it's funny. I think it's one of these years. The results of the Guineas, I'd say, will throw a few of the Trends boys off kilter, because I think we could get some funny results that don't necessarily lie in with what we expect historically, just because last year was such a strange one.
What I quite like, Martin, is that usually in the Guineas you have one or two horses that sort of stand out, I think it's fair to say. This year around, I do think we've got quite a big pot of horses that might develop into something for the future. So, I mean, I think there are 5 or 6 in there who potentially are really, really good. And that gives us a nice pot to work from, because we've been a little bit thin for me on divisions in recent seasons. Just one horse standing out in some of them, like Sprint Batash, the Stayers Stradivarius, when Gardens disappeared and wasn't up for the fight anymore, just gave up. I think it's quite nice that we've got this pot of horses. None of us really know, I don't think, for certain which is going to prove the best, but there's a big pot to choose from.
And Kevin, just going back to One Ruler, Matt talked about him and the vibes from Newmarket. What was your take on him last season?
Yeah, it's quite a perverse situation, Martin, in that the fav for the 2,000 guineas and the fav for the 1,000 guineas, aren't necessarily there on form. They're there on stable chat, really. And, one ruler has been very well backed, since all that chat last week relating to Master of the Seas that Matt mentioned there. And look, he looked a very nice 2-year-old last season. I thought he was beat fair and square by Max Sweeney on what was terrible ground. I thought he was, grand in beating Van Gogh. I didn't really see him as a potential Guineas winner. You would, I think there would want to have been a fair bit of progress now through the winter with him. But look, they have the horses, and if he's working all over Master of the Seas and La Barossa, you can see why they'd be encouraged given how the Craven went. But just on what we saw last year, I wouldn't have him as the fav now, I don't think.
The one thing I'd like to say, Martin, is that with Master of the Seas, I don't think you could conjure up a scenario at home that would make him look as good as he might be. He's clearly a difficult ride, not because he had to be manoeuvred out in the Craven, but he is a difficult ride. He has this headgear. I suspect that what happened in the Craven absolutely suited him ultimately. And underneath it all, because of course Buick's not going to come in and say, well, I actually got him in all that trouble and moved him out because I know he's quirky and he's going to enjoy it. No one's going to enjoy that from a breeding point of view for the future. But underneath it all, I just wonder whether all of that was part of the game of Master of the Seas. And you're not going to do that at home, are you? So you're never going to really be able to see the best of Master of the Seas. If he was working in a group with one ruler, I don't think you get the best out of him. I don't even know if they work in groups or even together. But I'm just saying that a race scenario is going to bring out the best in Master of the Seas, I had as a guess.
Would he be your choice for the 2,000, Matt?
The more I look at this, the more I take a risk on Thunder Moon travelling the best of these and quickening up. He's the one horse I think has that turn of foot. I think one ruler can plod on. I think Battleground stays well. I think St Mark's Basilica and Wembley both stay strong. Thunder Moon for me might just be the one horse who's got a turn of pace. And I so love the fact that I'm tipping this horse because of Kevin's very closely associated with the yard. It must make his heart sick.
Testament to the horse as well. He was a Group 1 winner on just his second start. Kevin, but your selection for the 2,000?
It wouldn't be a bullish one now, to be honest, but it's St Mark's Basilica, Martin. This really is a wide open Guineas, to the point where, small things like the draw and, just general look on the day, I think could be a deciding factor here. Like Matt says, there isn't a standout contender, and bar something really jumps out of the ground on the day and shows improvement. I would expect a really competitive finish here, and look on the day could be the deciding factor.
Yeah, it looks open, but maybe you'd like to put one ruler or Master of the Seas or Battleground in your Tote 10 to follow. You can do so. Enter this closing on the 1st of May. Tote 10 to follow back for 2021. 10 horses, points awarded for win and places. There's bonus points available as well. It only costs a £5 to enter. The season running from the 1st of May to the 16th of October, and prizes down to 500th place, monthly prizes and a free-to-play competition as well. If you want to enter, go to tote.co.uk/10 to follow. Well, let's look further into the season and to the Derby. And Aidan O'Brien again dominates at the head of the betting. This high definition, though, is the market leader. He's 2 from 2. He won the Beresford on his second start. He's the 7-2 favourite. It's 10-1 bar those. That brings in Bolshoi Ballet, Van Gogh, Wembley, Wordsworth, Hurricane Lane, Max Sweeney, Uncle Bryn, 25-1 and bigger. Is Kevin, high definition, the real deal?
He might be, Martin. Look, what he did in the Beresford was sensational to watch, really. He was beaten everywhere, and he produced this surge late on to get up close home. Look, he's clearly a horse that's going to stay well. I know they considered the Guineas, but I think they've probably made the right shout now. They're going to go down the Derby trial route and try to get him to Epsom. And look, there's a great amount of promise in there. I think as he steps up in trip will only help him. Epsom will be a small worry for a horse like him. He does lift his knee, and I'd say he'd appreciate a more orthodox track. We have seen horses that move like him get away with it at Epsom, but I think the likes of the Curragh will always suit him a bit better. But I'm excited to see him now. He's a very exciting middle distance prospect.
And Aidan's also got other ones in there, the likes of Bolshoi Ballet, Matt, who came out and won the Bally Sacks quite recently.
Yeah, just before I get on to it, I want to ask Kevin just very quickly about High Definition. Why are they riding him like he's an absolute hound? Is it just that he's as slow as an old boat and he's just not fast enough? Because in that Beresford, it was a deliberate act. He was steadied by Heffernan at the start, which for a horse who'd already shown that he was going to stay strongly, in many ways, the last thing any normal person would have do is have him right out the back, because his one asset appeared to be the fact that he was going to stay strong. And I mean, I can't really see what they're going to teach him by doing that, because you don't want to be out the back in the Derby. You know, we all know Lester Piggott was the master of Epsom. First 6 round Tattenham Corner was the thing with Piggott. First 3 a lot of the time. Why are they riding him as if he's an absolute hound?
I wouldn't say that. I think they rode him like the middle distance prospect he is. Like if you watch his debut, he just, it was probably greenness was a factor as well, but he just wasn't able to lay into them early. He was last on his debut until quite late and flew home again. And I think they decided pre-race that they were only going to give him this run. They weren't going to run him a third time last year. So they just wanted to get the maximum from it in terms of an experience. So they dropped him in. They probably hoped they'd get him to come through horses and learn a bit about racing that way. As it was, he wheeled around them and got really rolling late. But I think you just have to ride the horse as you feel he is. Will they look? I'd imagine he'll be much more capable of sitting handier as he goes up in trip. But they probably just wanted to maximise the run, knowing it was going to be his last run of the season. They just wanted to maximise it in terms of how much he learned from it.
Has that satisfied you, Matt?
Yeah. I mean, look, I don't know. I mean, he maybe he's just a great big green boat who could be brilliant in the Triumph Hurdle soon. I don't know, but he obviously is very talented. But I don't quite understand what they're trying to teach him by riding him as they are. It'd be nice to learn. Maybe someone will ask that question to Aidan at some stage. Bolshoi Ballet, it was interesting. He's been ridden by 3 different jockeys in 4 of his starters. Heffernan's had a go, Pierre-Charles Boudot's had a go, and Ryan Moore, of course, dictated last time. He looks good, but, Coolmore, the boys, the lads, they still like a tilt at the ring, and there wasn't any massive move for Bolshoi Ballet. I mean, it's not as if High Definition's collapsed at the top of the market and been pushed out, and Bolshoi Ballet's now close to favouritism. So, I don't know. He's clearly a good horse, but he might be a horse for me that stays in training as a 4 or 5-year-old and they have a bit of fun with, rather than the Derby winner for me.
And Kevin, of the Guineas horse we talked about from Ballydoyle, would Wembley maybe the one most likely from the Guineas pool to step forward towards a Derby?
I suppose they potentially could. Looking at his pedigree, sure, these Galileos will always have a chance of staying the 1.5 miles. It's probably more of a kind of a mile family. It's probably fair to say maybe up to 10 furlongs. So it would be a question mark. And look, it'll all depend on how they shape in the Guineas. I think that for me, the Guineas has reduced in value as a Derby trial going forward. I think the type of horses you want tend to end up in the Derby trials now from the get-go, rather than using the Guineas as a stepping stone. But to go back to Bolshoi Ballet, I really did like him last year. He did a lot in a very short space of time, and he was doing it on ground that he wouldn't like at all. You watch him, you could really see it the other day now when he got nicer ground. He is a particularly good moving horse. So for him to do as much as he did on soft ground last year, I think stood to him. I don't think it was a huge performance in the Bally Sacks. It was a kind of a muddling race, and it wasn't overly strong in the clock, I don't think. But he did what he had to do. It wasn't necessarily his fault, and he put the race away quite nicely. He should come forward from it. I thought maybe the bookmakers were a little bit hasty and kind of cutting him in as short as they did for the Derby. But, one assumes he'll go for the Derrinstown Derby trial now, and I'd expect an even bigger performance there.
And Matt, what do we make of the home defence? We've got Uncle Bryn in there for Gosden, 2 from 2 on the all-weather. And let's not forget Yabir as well for Charlie Appleby, a good winner at Newbury the back end of last season. He's a brother to Wild Illusion, of course, who was second in the Noak. So bred for these middle-distance classics. Absolutely,
Martin. Yeah, let's talk about just very quickly, just names that people can look out for that aren't following the sport every day of the week that might have missed. And you're absolutely right about Uncle Bryn. He's looked really, really good. it's just impossible to know with that all-weather form how good. An equal horse like that is Mark Johnson's See the Shells, who's won twice on the artificial surface. Looks really good. Who knows? I certainly don't. I think also we should give a mention to One Ruler. Now, on pedigree, he wouldn't necessarily be a 1.5 mile horse, probably best at 10 furlongs. But if he won the Guineas, he wouldn't be a 33-1 shot for the Derby if he was staying on strongly. And I like the look of Yabir. Now, I don't know whether he's going to be classy enough to win a Derby, but he beat a horse called Magellan at Newbury when we last saw him in September over a mile. I really love Magellan. I love his attitude. I think he's going to be a really good colt for Anthony Oppenheimer. And Yabir won his last 2 races, having not looked that special on the first 2 starts, really came into his own when stepped up to a mile on his final start, won his last 2. Now, he is very bred to stay. He's by Dubawi. Well, I don't need to mention him. He's out of a Monson mare. Monson, you could argue, was best at just over 1.5 miles. So when you combine Dubawi and Monson, you get a horse who should be staying 1.5 miles as a 3-year-old. And I think for Charlie Appleby, he could be quite a promising horse. He's not the highest in the betting, though, of the Appleby horses. That's a horse called Hurricane Lane, who has won both starts at Newmarket and Newbury and has already won over 1.25 miles. So if you just want a horse who has proven probably that it will get the 1.5 miles, no problem at all for Godolphin, Hurricane Lane's the one. So again, outside of High Definition, who everyone just decided would win the Derby after its first run, where it went like Pegasus from the back to the front. Outside of that, again, you've got this nice group of horses who no doubt will go to trials and could be quite promising.
And Kevin, your thoughts on any of those? Maybe thoughts on Max Sweeney or indeed any other Ballydoyle contenders?
I'll tell you, I'd give a mention to Sir Lamorak. He's a bit of a darker one. He won a handicap the other day of 85 over the same course of distance that the Ballysacks was run. And he compared very well to Bolshoi Ballet on the clock. And if you watch it, he was dropped in what was a steadily run race. You know, he was ridden quietly. He had an awful lot to do, and he's absolutely sprouted wings and flown home late on. For a horse that he's by Camelot, he's from the family of Galileo and See the Stars. He's very much bred to appreciate, certainly 1.5 miles. I just thought he showed a fair bit of class, albeit at a much lower level. I'm not saying he'll win the Derby, but I think he could step up into a Derby trial next time and probably be a little bit underestimated because he's won a handicap off 85 rather than, shooting around in better company. I think he's definitely one to keep an eye on.
Yeah, he was certainly very impressive. We also have news of an enhancement from the Tote as well. If you're betting through their website, you can have enhanced odds of 10%. It's a new bet available across all single and multi-leg bets on UK and Irish racing. And just to give you an example, Manila Times in the Grand National, the SP of 11-1, the Tote paid 13.20. And you can get more on that on tote.co.uk. So we've been looking at the 3-year-old Colts then, Colts to follow for the season, and we've all come up with one name apiece as a horse to follow. If we start with you, Kevin, what would be your 3-year-old to follow?
Yeah, I went with Sir Lamorak just because I think, like I say, that there might be some value in following him because I think that there's a chance he'll be underestimated next time. I'm guessing he'll step into a Derby trial. He could come over for something like the Dante even. And against some of the likely opposition there, he might just fly under the radar a small bit. So I'll go with him. OK, and Matt?
I was really tossing up between Yabir and Magellan. I think both of them are promising. I've ended up with Magellan, who everyone will have seen on Sky Sports Racing, winning at Newcastle. It was only a 4-runner race, but I think it was quite a hot little race. Legion of Honour, the runner-up, I think is decent. What's he going to go for, Magellan? Well, probably he's more of a French Derby type. But I just think he's a horse to follow. He's definitely a horse to put in your 10 to follow because I don't think he's going to be mollycoddled. The Oppenheimer, is not going to be around forever. He's going to want to see his horses run. And I just think this is a super tough beast. And that's the type of horse you want in a 10 to follow, who's going to run in decent races, but also run more than once every year, which, of course, is what most of those Irish horses do that Blake likes. So I'm going to go for Magellan.
And I'll throw to the mix Mutta Sabek as well, who was so impressive at Newmarket, won by 6 lengths on that occasion, 2 from 2 at the track. Cope with better ground that day. He could go into the could-be-anything category. So Salamarok, Magellan and Mutta Sabek are 3 colts to follow for the 2021 flat season. And that brings to the end the colts section of our flat season preview. Do look out on the website for the previews of the 3-year-old fillies and the older horses, and you'll find them all at theraces.com.